They say you should notice the signs: missed meetings, vague praise, the subtle shift in tone when your name enters a room. But I didn't. Or maybe I did and convinced myself it was nothing. Because when you've given 15 years of your life to something, you don't expect it to turn on you. Not suddenly, not quietly, not like this. It started with a calendar notification at 8:47 a.m. sharp. Strategic session, mandatory attendance. No agenda, no context, no familiar sender. Just sterile wording and implied authority. That kind of message hadn't existed before our new CEO, Graham Whitmore, arrived with his polished grin and obsession with one word he loved to scatter through every quarterly memo like it meant something profound: agility. Agility meant churn. Agility meant consultants with rehearsed smiles and hollow frameworks. Agility meant dismantling what worked and calling it progress. I had built this company, or at least the parts that didn't collapse under pressure. When I joined Phoenix Tech, it was 4 people sharing mismatched desks and borrowed Wi-Fi. I drafted the first vendor protocols, negotiated our earliest logistics contracts, and stayed long after midnight rewriting systems no one else wanted to touch. I trained entire generations of operations staff, handled crisis negotiations when our primary manufacturer shut down in 2013, and carried the weight without asking for recognition. I never chased titles. I didn't need them. The work spoke for me, or at least it used to. The meeting was scheduled in conference room 5C, which immediately felt wrong. Strategic conversations always happened upstairs in the glass-walled room with the skyline view and the perpetually broken cappuccino machine. Room 5C had no windows, one long, scarred table, and the lingering smell of old carpet cleaner. My heels echoed too loudly as I walked in. No one acknowledged me except one person, a young man, mid-20s at most, sitting straight-backed with his arms crossed like he already belonged there. I'd seen him in hallways before: designer watch, easy confidence, the kind of person who never doubted his own trajectory. He gave me a single nod, no greeting, no introduction. Graham sat beside him, smiling the same rehearsed smile he wore in board meetings and investor calls, dressed like he'd stepped straight out of a leadership retreat brochure. Monica from HR was on his other side, lips pressed tight, eyes glued to a tablet she refused to lift. "Linda," Graham said brightly, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Glad you could join us." The chair was cold when I sat. "We'll keep this brief," he said, folding his hands. "As part of our realignment toward a more forward-looking business model, we've made the decision to restructure the operations division." The words landed with practiced ease. No one else moved. "To be transparent," he continued, "we're prioritizing younger, more agile leadership, people who better represent the future of Phoenix Tech. This isn't personal." It never is, I thought. "You've been foundational to this company," he said, already speaking about me as if I were gone. "But it's time for new leadership." He delivered it like praise, like a graceful exit I should be grateful for. The young man shifted slightly, almost as if preparing to speak, then stopped. Graham gestured toward him. "This is Tyler. He'll be assuming your responsibilities effective immediately." Tyler Whitmore, his brother, a recent graduate, a summer shadow turned successor. I didn't react. I stood slowly, nodded once, and said nothing. Monica still hadn't looked up. Graham's smile faltered, maybe expecting anger or disbelief, but I gave him neither. I walked out with my composure intact, even as something inside me splintered. My office was already locked. Boxes waited neatly outside my door, labeled in tidy handwriting. Someone had planned this. I pulled out a framed team photo and stared at the woman smiling back at me. She looked confident, proud, like someone who believed loyalty still meant something. She felt like a stranger. As I carried the boxes toward the elevator, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but answered anyway. "Linda Ferris?" a calm voice asked. "This is Jordan Niles. I represent a client who's been tracking Phoenix Tech. We'd like to speak with you privately today." Then, quieter, "You may be more valuable than they realized." I don't remember leaving the building. I don't remember the lobby or the nod I gave the security guard. I found myself sitting on a low stone bench outside the parking garage, boxes beside me, coat open to the cold. 15 years erased in under 3 minutes. People passed without looking. I was invisible. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Linda Ferris?" a deep voice said, deliberate and steady. "This is Daniel Mercer, the CEO of Stratuscore, Phoenix Tech's biggest competitor, a man who, until now, had barely acknowledged me beyond an industry panel years ago. I heard what happened," he said. "Phoenix Tech made a mistake, and I want you to know I've been watching your work for a long time." He wasn't offering sympathy. His tone was too controlled for that. "I'd like to meet, just a conversation." The cafe was quiet, tucked away downtown, all glass and warm light. Daniel was already there. He stood, shook my hand, and slid a slim black folder across the table. Inside was an acquisition plan. Stratuscore intended to acquire Phoenix Tech, and under leadership transition, my name appeared. Executive Director, Interim CEO. "This isn't just a job," I said. "No," he agreed. "It's an opportunity." That night, sleep never came. I lay on my couch staring at the folder, thinking about power and timing and everything they thought they'd erased. Then I remembered it. A clause. A footnote. Clause B. A provision I'd drafted years ago during governance cleanup. Any former board member retained a 90-day right to advisory oversight during a pending acquisition. It had slipped through because no one thought it mattered. At 2:13 a.m., I powered up an old external drive and searched until I found it. Page 46. Clause B. My edits, my signature, still valid. Phoenix Tech thought they erased me. They thought they could rewrite history and move on without consequence. But they missed something. They missed this. I still had oversight, not just symbolically, but legally. For 90 days from my last board-attached project, I had access to internal data, meeting transcripts, transition plans. I had the right to be there, to see everything and ask questions, and I wasn't going to tell a soul. Because when Stratus made its move and Phoenix scrambled to keep its footing, I'd be holding the card they thought they burned. Sometimes power isn't about raising your voice. Sometimes it's about knowing when to stay silent and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And I could wait. It began with an email, just one, sent at 6:47 a.m. the next morning. The subject line was simple. "Let's talk." I sent it to Allison T.R., former Director of Product Integration. She'd been forced out during a realignment 2 years ago, an excuse wrapped in pretty language. She had built half the user interface systems Phoenix still relied on. She replied within 8 minutes. When and where? Next was Marcus Doyle, the man who had kept our logistics flow alive during the 2017 supply chain freeze. He had been scapegoated when a vendor failed something entirely beyond his control. Then Priya Ramanathan, who redesigned the customer success framework, and even gruff, sarcastic Will Hobbs, who once told me the only thing holding the company together was duct tape and people like me. One by one, they came back. We met quietly, neutral spaces, cafes, co-working lounges, even an old wine bar in the financial district where no one cared who whispered in the corner. They remembered me, and more importantly, they remembered the truth. Who had created the processes? Who had led through crisis? Who had quietly held the company together while others soaked up the spotlight? "I knew something was wrong the moment your name disappeared," Priya said. "They've always feared competence." I nodded, listening, collecting not just words but energy. There was a charge in the air, like dry static before a storm. While we reconnected, I laid the groundwork. Quietly, I worked with the legal consultant recommended by Daniel's team, refining the language in Clause B, preparing to file official notices of oversight rights if necessary. I traced access points to Phoenix's shared legal repository, cross-verified the merger prep materials, and began drawing a digital map of transition pathways. I wasn't just watching, I was building. The transfer of power wouldn't come with trumpets or declarations. It would happen the way real power always does, silently, all at once. They'd wake up one morning thinking they still held the reins, only to realize the hands guiding the horse weren't theirs anymore. The old guard was waking up, and I was leading them back home. 2 days later, a secured document appeared in my inbox, sent by Daniel's operations team. It was exactly what I had been waiting for, a full list of Phoenix Tech's current executive leadership, names, titles, divisions, tenure, faces I once worked beside. Some I had mentored, others I had tried to warn. I scanned the list slowly, and with every name the memory sharpened. Kara Ellis, once a junior analyst on my team, promoted twice in my final year. She had submitted a quiet but scathing review during my exit process, one I wasn't meant to see but found buried in an archived HR file. Ben Cray, head of strategic partnerships now. He'd shaken my hand the week before I was let go, told me how much he respected me, then signed the internal petition calling for fresh operational leadership. They had all played their roles, not actively malicious, but complicit, eager to climb, willing to let someone else take the fall. I opened a new file and created 2 columns, keep, fire. My fingers moved steadily, calmly, with surgical focus. There was no anger, no vendetta, just assessment, cold, clear judgment. The ones who fought to build, the ones who stepped aside, the ones who signed. For each name, I wrote brief notes, their contributions, their risks, their loyalties. I wasn't just making a personnel chart, I was creating the foundation for a new regime. Because when the merger hit, and it would hit fast, I needed to know who was staying and who would be escorted out before their morning coffee. By the end of the day, the list was nearly complete. I saved it with one word: sovereign. I returned to Phoenix Tech on a gray Monday morning, walking through its sliding glass doors with a new badge clipped to my coat. Linda Ferris, Strategic Advisor. That's what it read. To everyone else, I was just a consultant brought in to assist during a transitional period. No one asked who had arranged it. No one questioned why I'd been granted clearance to sit in on executive meetings. I walked past the reception desk, past the hall where I had spent 15 years pouring out my life, and not a single person stopped me. They didn't see me as a threat. Good. Let them underestimate me. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the executive floor. The walls were mirrored, polished, flawless, just like the illusions they tried to maintain. But cracks had already started to show. When the doors opened, I was greeted by silence, not the productive kind, the heavy, uneasy kind. Phones rang unanswered, people whispered in glass rooms with furrowed brows and white-knuckled grips on their coffee mugs. I was escorted into a temporary office, small but well-appointed, a desk, a monitor, a view of the downtown skyline. They thought they were being generous, keeping me at arm's length but close enough to contribute. What they didn't realize was that this gave me front-row access to the chaos, and chaos, I soon discovered, was putting it mildly. Customer support requests went unanswered for days. A major logistics pipeline had broken down because someone failed to renew a contract. Sales leads were fumbled twice due to duplicate outreach. The quarterly roadmap presentation had been postponed 3 times, and no one could explain why the numbers didn't match. In the center of it all stood Tyler, the CEO's brother, fresh-faced, overconfident, out of his depth. He walked around with a tablet and a permanent frown, delegating wildly, asking questions he should have known the answers to, and delivering monologues to mask his uncertainty. I watched him stumble through a stakeholder call, mispronouncing a client's name and promising metrics we hadn't hit in months. Behind him, his hand-picked team was unraveling. Mid-level managers looked to each other in confusion. Directors kept their heads down, afraid to be noticed. The mood was brittle. Fear, not respect, held things together. I said nothing. I simply observed. In one meeting, I watched Kara Ellis stammer through a status update, while Tyler barked at her for figures she wasn't responsible for. She caught my eye once, a flicker of recognition, and then looked away. In another, I watched Ben Cray dodge questions about a broken vendor relationship he mishandled. He smiled too much, laughed too loudly, and left before the meeting ended. No one seemed to know who was in charge anymore, which meant in time they would start looking around. I kept a notepad on my desk, nothing official, no labels, just quick sketches, notes, arrows, names, crossed out initiatives, overlapping timelines, my own private intelligence log. I wasn't here to fix anything, not yet. I was here to witness, and the most dangerous person in any room is the one who says nothing while taking in everything. Let them flail, let the seams rip wide open. The reckoning was coming, and when it did, they would realize the advisor wasn't just a visitor, she was the storm. It happened mid-afternoon during one of those lull moments when the office buzz turned from chaos to confusion. I was reviewing the latest operations log when an email popped into my inbox. No subject, no header, just a stream of forwarded threads from an overwhelmed analyst named Rachel Lynn. It wasn't meant for me, but the moment I saw the contents, I knew it had landed exactly where it needed to. Attached was a customer feedback summary flagged as urgent. 3 major clients, long-standing, high-volume accounts, had expressed a direct refusal to continue projects led by Phoenix Tech's current head of SEO, Charles Verne. Their words were blistering. Strategy disconnected from market reality, delivered outdated models masked as innovation, refuses to adapt, not aligned with current brand goals. I scrolled further. A breakdown of performance metrics showed a steady decline in organic traffic, lead conversion, and keyword relevancy. Charles had been boasting about numbers in recent meetings, but those numbers were paper-thin, decorative, all flash, no foundation. He had been my peer once, not brilliant, but bold, and when I left, he had been among those who publicly supported the realignment. I remembered his signature at the bottom of the internal endorsement letter. But what struck me most wasn't just the decline, it was the silence around it. No one seemed to be ringing alarm bells. Either they were too afraid to challenge Charles or they were too consumed by their own fires to notice another blaze. I spent the next hour backtracking through Rachel's thread, mapping the timeline of client dissatisfaction. It hadn't started this week, it had started months ago. There were ignored warnings, soft flags, emails marked low priority that now read like premonitions. The client most vocal in their disappointment was Solar Inc., a renewable energy tech firm we had fought hard to land 3 years ago. I remembered sitting across from their CEO, arguing the case for ethical and scalable growth. I remembered what it had taken to win their trust. Now they were walking away. And Charles, he was still holding weekly optimization briefings like a general who hadn't noticed half the troops had defected. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence. The erosion wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It was slow, silent, and deeply rooted in ego. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms, letting the weight of it settle. They had thrown away experience for optics. They had gambled on shortcuts and self-assured smiles, and now the bill was coming due. I didn't forward the email. I didn't respond to Rachel. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way, and some collapses need to be witnessed, not warned about. For now, I let the cracks widen, because soon enough they'd cave in. It happened at precisely 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. The press release was brief and clinical, standard formatting, company letterhead, and a single line that broke the silence like a thunderclap. Phoenix Tech announces Linda Ferris as interim chief executive officer, effective immediately. By 9:07, it had reached every inbox in the building. At 9:10, the Slack channels went quiet. By 9:15, you could hear a pin drop on the executive floor. I arrived exactly at 9:30, dressed in slate gray, hair tied back, expression unreadable. The badge still read advisor, but it was now only a formality. Security had already been notified, credentials had already changed, legal had already prepared the documents. No announcement was made over the intercom, no speech was given in the break room, no one ushered me in. I simply walked through the hallways, past the departments that had once ignored me, past the whispers and sideways glances. No one dared speak. Some stood, some stared, some bowed their heads, remembering. The door to the CEO's office was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The decor had changed. Modern artwork, a massive gold-framed mirror, a leather armchair in the corner meant to scream authority. And on the desk, Tyler's desk, was a digital nameplate still blinking with his credentials. I didn't hesitate. I opened the drawer and removed it. The monitor booted to the login screen. I typed in my credentials and accepted. Within moments, the room was mine again. I didn't need applause. I didn't need validation. I just needed silence. One by one, I began removing items. Not dramatically, strategically. The oversized ego trophies went first. The etched plaque, next-gen visionary. The glass sculpture that served no purpose. The branded notebooks filled with empty brainstorming jargon. Each one placed gently in a box. There was no anger in my hands, just precision. I found my old coffee mug in the bottom drawer, the one with the faint crack in the handle, the one that had survived 15 years of early mornings and late nights. I placed it beside the monitor. It belonged here. The final piece was the framed motivational quote on the wall. Disruption breeds progress. I stared at it a long moment, then pulled it down. Behind it was a faded pinhole and a faint outline of the photo I'd once hung there. Me and the old team, the ones who had stayed late, bled for deadlines, laughed through power outages, and wept through layoffs. I smiled, a real one. Then I opened my briefcase, removed a sleek black folder, and laid it on the desk. Inside were the next 90 days, and they belonged to me. The meetings began the following morning. One by one, I scheduled them. Private 15-minute windows, enough time to hear the truth or confirm silence. Every employee who had remained at Phoenix Tech when I was let go received an invitation. Some arrived fidgeting, some smiling nervously, hopeful. Others tried to appear confident, as if the shift in power hadn't affected them. I greeted each one calmly. I didn't lecture, I didn't accuse, I asked only one question. Why didn't you say anything? Some apologized immediately, voice trembling, remorse etched into their posture. They admitted to fear, politics, cowardice dressed up as professionalism. I should have said something, Linda.
I knew it was wrong, Kara Ellis whispered, her eyes avoiding mine. I just didn't know how to fight it. Others justified their silence, told stories about being caught off guard or assuming there was a plan. I nodded, took notes, but made no promises. Apologies were accepted only when they came without defense. Some didn't speak at all. They sat, hands folded in their laps, eyes blank, as if the moment hadn't arrived. I marked their names quietly. With each meeting, I grew quieter inside. Not colder, just clearer. Every apology was a window into the true culture we had become. The excuses spoke louder than the regrets. And then Megan walked in, my former assistant. She entered slowly, clutching her phone like a shield. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just emotionally dimmed, tired, hesitant. Her eyes flicked around the office before settling on me. She sat across from me, tears already glistening in her eyes. I owe you more than an apology, she said. I owe you the truth. I said nothing. I was asked to watch you, she continued, to report if you resisted change, if you started asking questions. Graham said it was standard protocol during transitions. She paused, shaking her head. But it wasn't. It was betrayal, and I did it because I thought it would protect me. The silence between us was suffocating. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I hated every second of it. You were never cruel to me. You never dismissed me. You brought me into meetings when no one else would. And I watched you get dismantled and said nothing. I kept your schedules for them, took notes they asked for, And once, I even printed the HR memo announcing your removal. My chest tightened. I won't be silent anymore, she said finally. Whatever you need, I'll do it. Not for redemption, but because you deserve better. I watched her closely, and I believed her, not because of her words, but because of her shame. Real shame doesn't posture, it pleads. It shows itself raw and vulnerable without needing forgiveness. I stood, walked around the desk, and placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't owe me. You owe the truth. Start there. She nodded, breath-catching. As she left, I noted something unexpected in her walk. Resolve. That's when I knew redemption might be rare, but it wasn't impossible. And just like that, the reckoning continued. Not loud, not dramatic. One face, one choice, one truth at a time. It was late afternoon when Charles Verne walked in without being scheduled. He didn't knock, he didn't wait. He entered like he still had power, like he expected the world to revolve around his voice. "Linda," he said with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, "we haven't had a chance to catch up." I remained seated. "I've been thinking," he continued, stepping closer. "We're in a new chapter now. I think we could make a great team, you and I. My insights, your leadership, real synergy." He said the word like it meant something, like it could convince me to forget the past. I opened a drawer, pulled out a sealed envelope, and slid it across the desk toward him. He looked down, confused. "What's this?" "Your termination," I said evenly, effective immediately. The silence between us cracked. His face faltered, shifting from confusion to disbelief. "You're serious?" I didn't blink. "You've already assisted us by revealing your true nature." He opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, but thought better of it. The weight of reality settled on his shoulders. For once, Charles Verne had no clever spin, no prepared defense. He picked up the envelope with a shaky hand and left without another word. No shouting, no theatrics, just quiet consequences. I watched through the glass as he walked down the hall, shoulders stiff, head slightly lowered. A few employees peeked from their offices, uncertain of what had just happened, but aware that something had shifted. I turned my gaze to the window, the city below bathed in gold from the setting sun. There was a strange calm in the air, like the brief, still breath between thunder and lightning. My fingers drummed lightly on the desk. Charles's removal wasn't about settling scores, it was about standards, about restoring a company built on substance, not illusion. And if I was going to rebuild Phoenix Tech from the ground up, there could be no room for the rot that had spread beneath the polished surface. Every decision now mattered. Every move had to be deliberate, purposeful. There were more names on my list, more meetings to schedule. But as the door clicked shut behind Charles, I allowed myself one moment of stillness. This wasn't vengeance, this was reclamation. In the weeks that followed, the office adjusted to the new rhythm. Some adjusted willingly, others did so out of necessity, but all of them, in some small way, felt the shift. I never raised my voice, I never made grand declarations or sweeping speeches. I simply showed up, made decisions, and held people accountable. I wasn't interested in praise, I was interested in truth. One afternoon, I walked past the glass conference room where just months ago I had been forced to box up my things. That same room now held strategy meetings, my strategies, with my hand-picked team. A junior analyst I had mentored once stood outside the room. He looked nervous. I stopped beside him. "Something on your mind?" I asked. He looked at me, then nodded slowly. "How do you do it? Stay calm, not let it get personal." I smiled, soft but resolute. "Oh, it is personal, but it doesn't have to be messy. When you know your value, you don't argue, you act." I turned to leave, then paused. "And one more thing," I added. "Never mistake silence for weakness. Sometimes it's just preparation." That night, as the office lights dimmed and the last elevator hummed to a stop, I sat alone in my corner office. I opened my notebook and wrote a single line at the bottom of a clean page. "Integrity is remembered longer than power." I closed the book and then got back to work.